party's over.
I don't think so.
Take a seat. We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome one, welcome all. It's another week of Star Wars After Party. We're talking 2D Clone Wars, and there's someone here. Someone here is real excited about it. He's losing his mind. Got a little Star Wars news to talk about. Do a little commentating on that. Kind of figure out what everybody's been up to in Star Wars land. Some updates on Outlaws, some things like that. All of it's coming. Tyler Bodkins, I've been in this fight since I was 8 years old. And with us, a name I haven't heard in a long time. A long time. Of course we know him. He's Cameron Porter.
I never would have thought we'd be talking about 2D Clone Wars.
Man, it's been a long time coming, at least 2 decades worth of time coming.
Yeah.
And it's been 2 weeks since I've seen you last. Mm-hmm. You were much missed by me. I saw at least one comment on YouTube that was like, "Oh, I wish Cameron was here." Everybody wishes you were here. Even Kayla wished you were here.
Dang.
Everybody.
I enjoyed watching you guys though. I was watching it the other day while I was working.
Nice.
Or listening to
That's
it.
a very different experience.
Oh
right?
yeah. It's like that's usually where I'm sitting. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then with us, maybe slightly on, slightly off screen, I got my cousin Jake over here doing some engineering for us, so I get to focus on the conversation a little bit more. I feel like I'm a little looser. I don't have to kind of like keep one eye on Pro Tools and one eye on Cameron. I just got both eyes, and I got my third eye looking off to
always
who knows where. I got my tinfoil hat on. We got it all. We're talking about it all. Like I said, we're talking 2Ds. Am I saying his name right? Genndy Tartakovsky? Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not busting out the notes.
No.
We're just having fun. It's Sunday. It's like 3:00, I guess. It's a little different, but we're in the zone. Cameron, you were out like gigging last night, right?
Yep. I was in Charleston last night.
Man,
I cut hair all day yesterday and then got in the car and drove to Charleston and played a gig till midnight.
You're not gonna like this, but me, Jake, and Caleb have just kind of been hanging out, eating food. Traveling all around at our own leisurely pace. We've had the exact opposite weekend.
Congratulations.
You know what? It's the yin and the yang.
That's right.
You know, it's where we meet.
No rest for the wicked.
Yeah. But I'm glad to hear that you checked out the pod and that it sounds like you enjoyed it a bit, and I'm glad you're back. I do want to talk a little bit about some Star Wars news. I want to update you and everybody else on Star Wars Outlaws, and then we'll get into that. So, couple things. We'll start with Star Wars Outlaws.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, we came on. You kind of heard my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
The game is cool. It's a Star Wars game. And so, on one hand, I'm having a blast. But I was just having a lot of struggles with the game. I felt like the way that you have described to me you feel when playing games.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
The way you talk about how you're like, that's how I felt, but I play games. Like, I feel like I should be able to
figure out the controls.
Right. And so I want to update a little bit on that. First off, we'll start with, it's all good. It's all good. It's all, I feel like, trending towards the light side of the Force here. So first off, we played a mission where I won't give like too many plot. Again, there's really not much because we're still in like the first planet.
Yeah.
And we left Canto Bight, but we're in like the first planet, and we're doing a lot of side stuff. So we're not really getting into a whole lot of plot heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up in this like Imperial space station, and it was so cool.
Dang.
Like, it was just awesome. Like once we were doing all that and creeping around the space station, it was just so cool, and I'm still really loving the reputation system.
Yeah.
Where you get to sort of pick like between Crimson Dawn and the Pikes. And it's really cool.
It's like choose your own adventure kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, two things. One, I saw an article where the video game director, whose name I can't recall, apologies, said that he was committed to making the game better. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of the qualms that I've had with controls and the way things feel The game is super buggy. Like there was one time recently, I think it was maybe yesterday or something, where I'm on a mission, and the mission was really cool. Again, it was like another Imperial base that I was infiltrating to like break someone out so I can get this cool slicing system. All very exciting and very cool.
Yeah.
But like as I'm playing that mission, I unlock this door, which is an elevator, and I step into the elevator, and it doesn't work. And it's an empty room, and I'm like, is this an elevator? I thought this was an elevator. I thought I was going up. Okay, maybe not. So I like play the game more. I go. I'm all over this base, and I'm like, I think that was an elevator. I'm pretty sure it was an elevator. So I go back to the elevator, and I go and I stand in. It doesn't do anything, and I was like, let me die. And then I died, and then I went back, and then the elevator worked. And it's stuff like that that's kind of like, come on, man. I paid. Well, we paid like, that was kind of cool. We did only pay like $50, but it's like a $70 game.
Yeah.
And it's so in that way, it's a little frustrating.
Rightfully so.
Hearing the director say, "Hey, we're aware, we're working on it."
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. I wish these AAA games would stop being rushed out before they're ready.
Right.
But I get that. Ultimately, I went to one of the original places that I had a really difficult time with the stealth. I think I've just gotten a lot more used to it, even though it's not the kind of stealth that I would prefer. Part of it was just I think I sucked, and I've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
So all good. I just wanted to update everybody.
Yeah.
Like it's a fun game, and I'll keep updating because we do like an hour a day, and it's pretty vast. There's a lot going on. So yeah,
I love a good side quest heavy game.
it's very side quest heavy.
Yeah.
And it has the look and feel a lot of KOTOR, I feel like. And there's tons of side quests. See, Kayla likes it too. She likes a game where it's just like you. It's your favorite game ever.
Skyrim.
And talk to me about Skyrim a little bit.
Skyrim is something that you will just never run out of stuff to do.
Okay.
Side quests all over the place. You walk into a new city along your like main storyline, and every single person in the city has some kind of side quest you could end up on.
Yeah. You run into a lot of that. And it's very exploration friendly.
Yeah.
Lots of like, there's a treasure thing here.
Yep.
Go get this special suit armor thing over there. So maybe I spoke a little too soon last week when I said that Cameron wouldn't like playing this game. Maybe it is.
I felt like it would be something that I bowed out of like the competitive like first person shooter games a long time ago because people went this direction with it, and I stayed right here, and like everybody got way better, and I just couldn't keep up anymore. So something like Skyrim that's a little bit slower paced, or something that's got a lot of like variance to it.
And I don't want people coming at either of us. I'm not necessarily saying that this game, and neither is Cameron, saying that this game is like Skyrim, but if you like that slower pace, I do think that the game rewards that kind of playing.
Yeah.
And I think that my issue is I kind of wanted it to move faster. And even now, I'm like, yo, I've had this Star Wars game for a week. And for me to have a Star Wars game for a week and not be able to tell you all the plot points kind of is like bugging me a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's going to take me probably months to really play through. And on one hand, that's cool because great, I got more Star Wars in my life. I'd like to be done by Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I guess it's just not my natural way. So it causes me a little frustration, but it's a good lesson because I'm trying to like, all right, okay.
Slow it down. You got to look at it more like, look at it less like a game to be like completed and more of like an interactive,
absolutely,
like an interactive movie or an interactive TV show that you're like playing a part of. Like watch it play out versus like, how do I like accomplish the tasks and get to the end goal? It's
funny. This is a lesson that's getting thrown at me in life a lot lately because even, my cousin Jake here comes to town. He's just like, no agendas, no plan, go with the flow, take things slow, hang out, whatever. And I, in the past, have been more of the, this is my plan. This is what's going to happen.
From 10 to 2, I'll do this. And then 2 to 3, yeah.
But the idea of just being able to like chill out, go with the flow, seems to be the way,
Yeah.
So Cool. Well, Star Wars Outlaws, I would love to hear if you're playing it out there in the listening audience. You can do a couple things. You could just, if you're watching on YouTube, comment. Let me know what you're thinking about the game. Let me and Cameron know through voice message if you want. You can record a voice memo and shoot it into Star Wars Afterparty at gmail.com. We'll play you on the show. So if you have some things to add or some agreements or questions or whatever, please feel free, and we'll absolutely have you here on the show. We would love to. Let's talk a little bit about some Star Wars news. So the biggest thing that I saw this week, Cameron, did you see the news about Star Wars television and Disney Plus and their plans for Star Wars TV? Have you heard this?
No.
So
I've been like going a million miles in every direction this week, and none of them have been Star Wars related.
Maybe you should play Star Wars Outlaws. It'll slow you down real quick. Okay, so long story short, and this seems to line up with, like, for instance, D23, if we think about what we got, which was not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Reports are stating, sources claiming, you get the words I'm using here?
Yeah.
That Disney is really slowing down the TV streaming shows, like including Star Wars. The reports are suggesting one per year. And if you think about what we have coming up, we've got Skeleton Crew to finish out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Andor has been announced for 2025. And while the production won't take as long, Ahsoka isn't going to begin shooting reportedly until the Mando movie is finished shooting.
Wow.
So, while the movie presumably is going to have a longer post-production than the Ahsoka TV series, we're just going to use the simple math here of the Mando Grogu movie comes out in 2026.
And then...
So you would think the Ahsoka show, even if it beat it by 5 or 6 months, even though it shoots after, it's not coming out until 2026.
They'll push it until 27. Yeah.
Or possibly 27, but it seems like it could still land in that 2026, either right before or right after the Grogu movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mando Grogu. So that shows me 2024 Skeleton Crew is going to wrap it up. 2025 Andor Season 2. 26 Ahsoka. Seems like we're just getting one a year.
Yeah.
That does seem to be what it is.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not a more of a PR choice, with the state of affairs within the fandom right now. You got so many, you got loud voices that are angry about so many things, and Disney kind of taking a step back and saying, "Hey, we're not going to apologize for what we've come out with, but we are going to say we're going to take it a little bit slower with like releasing stuff." So.
Could be.
I could see that being the reason why. It also just could be budgetary.
I think it's a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I think it is what you said. We talked a little bit last week on the pod about meeting some people who were like, great time to be alive, being a Star Wars fan. There's so much Star Wars coming at us. I remember whenever there wasn't that much. Maybe part of having so much Star Wars coming out is that there's almost lessons. I know that I'm not suggesting this is why people don't like it. Everyone has their reasons, but there's almost less incentive to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't like it, just wait 3 months and maybe your flavor will come out.
Yep.
Whereas if it's more like a once a year type event, as much as I enjoy getting a couple series a year, I could see that being almost like good for fandom in some sense.
Yeah, it's like, well, this is the Star Wars that I get for the year, so I'm going to watch it and hate it, and then maybe think about it some more, and then watch it again.
That's a good point.
Or like try to like dig in a little bit deeper, rather than like completely check out of something halfway through and be like, well, 2 months from now I'll get a new show.
Yeah. So the other side of the report stated that they're going to be focusing on the films, which this tracks. I mean, there's like 4 films in development. You got the Mando Grogu.
Mm-hmm.
You've got James Mangold doing the sort of Dawn of the Jedi thing, which I think Jedi Prime is the name of that film. I could be wrong, but I think so. You got, I can't remember the director's name, but the Rey film.
Yeah.
Shinoy, I think is her last name. And then you've got Dave Filoni's culminating Mando-verse movie that's supposed to happen at the end of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we got 4 films and supposedly there's a bunch more in development. And it seems a part of the strategy that Disney is doing to bolster their cinematic output. So it's kind of strange because COVID hit and they were like, great, we're poised for this TV thing.
Yep.
Forget movie theaters. There was talk for a long time. Movie theaters are dying. They're gone.
Yeah, gone.
And now it's like, no, people like the theaters again, which of course they do. It's a good communal experience.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's a shift more towards movies, which I'm cool with. I'll be honest, dude. If we got a couple of Star Wars movies a year, which is what their original plan was, it seems to be what they're shifting back to because we are supposed to get 2, I believe, in 27. And or maybe it was, whatever. I'm not even trying to go down that rabbit hole. Point being, if we're getting 1 or 2 movies a year, and then we get 1 live action and 1 animated and a game or 2, and we get comics every week, we're still eating good.
We're still good. Yeah.
We're still eating good. There's still tons of Star Wars. And so none of it's bad. But, I mean, what are your overall thoughts before we sort of switch gears? And I'll give one last culminating thought here.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it will allow more resources to pour into whatever projects are going on, rather than them having so many things going on that they've got to spread themselves way too thin.
Right.
John and Dave, whatever their involvement will be, can be singularly focused on one project at a time.
Yeah.
As far as oversight and production and making sure things remain aligned with the timeline that like they want to see continued in Star Wars. So yeah, I think it's a smart decision. I'm like you, like I'm kind of bummed to think about not getting like 2 to 3 Star Wars projects a year.
Right.
But I do like the thought of them like taking a real step back, and just using this as kind of a time to slow themselves down a little bit, dig a little bit deeper into one project at a time and move that way.
Yeah, all great points. And I will say this too, like if I kind of think about sort of a sweet spot of Star Wars fandom, there was something very special about that timeline of like Mando season 1. And I know it's not everyone's favorite, but just the excitement of going to see Rise of Skywalker. Like there's a new Star Wars movie coming. And then, Mando season 2 into Bad Batch, into Book of Boba Fett. If that's kind of the way that things are, where we're having like a season of live action, a movie, an animated series, dude, I mean, that's fun.
Yeah.
Here's my one concern that I would have with the streaming being sort of cut down. If we're only getting 1 Star Wars live action show a year, then what does that mean for a season 2 of any show?
Oh yeah. Like how much further down the line does that push that?
And do we ever get shows that have more than 1 season again? Because like obviously with Andor, 2 seasons, great. Ahsoka, we're getting a 2nd season, awesome.
Yep.
Mando felt like this show that was going to just keep going and going and going until there was obviously a clear, switch. And I think that when season 3 was coming out, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching it, that circle kind of coming to close, and I was like, that feels like an ending. And then there was an interview that came out not long after where Filoni said an ending of sorts.
Yeah.
That was the words that he used. And so I think they knew what they were doing, ending that. So I don't believe that this is like some, oh man, the Acolyte got a bunch of backlash, so let's stop everything we're doing. I think
right. I don't think so either.
I think that what we were sort of in was the Bob Chapek era of Disney, which was like announce everything, just ton out the content on streaming. It'll work out. Don't worry. I feel like Iger's like, guys, this isn't working. There's no reason to expect it to work. Let's focus on getting that money at the box office because that's where we make all of our money. And yeah, it just seems like a switch to that. Last thing I'm going to say is this. I still just really don't like all of this. Like, we're just going to drop it out there and let some random source say this. Why can't you just say, season 2 of Ahsoka is going to come after that? We're going to take our time. You're going to get 1 series. Like, why does it always have to be sources say this and da 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 da?
Yeah.
It's like, they don't ever say what it is. At least with George Lucas, whether it came out or not. Again, shout out to the podcast Blast Points. They played this really cool panel from Celebration 3 or something. It was from like 2000. It was right before Revenge of the Sith came out.
Yeah.
Like the month of Revenge of the Sith was about to come out. And, George Lucas is like, we're making this show, Clone Wars, and everybody's cheering. And he's like, and then we're doing this live action TV show, which they developed, and ultimately it didn't happen. But he just told people, like, yeah, this is what we're doing. And we're going to try to bring Indiana Jones back. And we're thinking about doing a Willow TV series, which a lot of the stuff ended up happening with Disney Plus, which is funny. But
Sure, yeah.
he just told people, like, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is what it is.
Yep.
And it doesn't even matter.
There's no smoke and
Yeah.
mirrors. It's just like, hey, everyone, I'm going to let you in on the family meeting.
Exactly.
Me, George, I'm here telling you about what we have going on, and like just to get to hear it in that plane of terms of like,
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this Clone Wars era show that we've got in development right now.
Yes.
It's like, okay, cool. Like that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be all this mystery and leakers and rumors and it's just a lot to follow. But I mean that's what churns, views on websites and media and so
I get it on one hand, but I'm with you. It just feels better if it's more open. And again, it's not, hey, save your surprises. Like, it's not that you have to say everything.
Yeah.
Like, it was nice when I finished season 2 of Mando and there was a post-credit scene and it was the Book of Boba Fett. And it was like, what? Like, that was so exciting. Like, you could still do those things.
Sure.
But there is something about, like, it's just like a feeling.
Yeah.
It just feels darker to be like, just go tell this person that and just, no, nothing's verified and it's all.
It makes it feel like there's problems there.
Insidious.
It's like, why is somebody like sneaking around talking to a reporter? Like, what information are they like so under lock and key?
Yeah.
That they would have to do that. So it gives it this like dirty connotation, and then it makes you think like, this is an employee of Lucasfilm that's leaking information that they were told not to. So,
or maybe they were told to. Like, we don't know.
Oh, yeah.
That's just it.
But it's like, so how bad are things at Lucasfilm for this employee to be like, yeah, I don't care. I'll just, go reveal this highly confidential information to the press. Yeah.
It does. And if it was, hey, you go tell this person that, and that came from up top, it's still, we don't know that. And so it does. It breeds all this weird, I don't know. I guess you can choose to not be a part of it, and that's probably very wise.
Yeah.
But it's just such a weird thing, and I just wish that they would stop doing that. I don't know. I just wish they would stop doing that.
Yeah.
If you're going to cut back, fine. Like, I'm with you. If that's what needs to be done so that creators are able to make the best things that they can make, of course, our show has been very vocal about that.
Yeah.
Do it, please. But I don't know. It is something about the cloak and dagger nature that feels very, Darth Sidious.
It sends you down all these rabbit holes, and you're trying to figure. It's just, it's a lot. Let's take off all the pressure.
Yep.
Just everybody sit down and say, hey, here's what we have going on at Star Wars right now, or Lucasfilm. Like,
exactly.
That's all it has to be.
I think we're gonna get there. Let's take a quick break.
You're listening to Star Wars After Party. We're honored that you would join us. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for video and wherever you get your podcasts for audio. If you would like to help the pod grow, consider sharing with the Star Wars fans in your life. In addition, leaving 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, giving the video a like, or leaving a comment on YouTube are extremely helpful. Written reviews are the best way to help the podcast reach new listeners. We appreciate your support. Lastly, we want to hear from you. Record a voice memo on your phone and send it over to starwarsafterparty@gmail.com. Written email works too. Now, back to the after party.
All right. So, here's why we're really here. We're here to talk about the 20-year-old series, Clone Wars, the 2D.
Yep.
The Clone Wars Classic. I don't know how they're describing it. It was in a weird spot of Disney Plus. I had to look really hard.
Is it really 20 years old?
Yeah, bro. I think it came out in 2004. I think it came out in between episodes 2 and 3.
So, yeah, definitely.
So episode 3 came out in 2005. I want to say it was either 2003 or 2004 that this aired.
Gosh.
So Cameron, dude, you're the expert, bro. This is your thing. I am your Padawan. I watched it for the first time. So I'm
Yeah.
I know a lot of times when we talk, I'm like, all right, Cameron, I got all my notes.
Yeah,
And I did take some notes because I'd literally never seen any of it
Yeah.
before. I'll get that out. But
Well,
Cameron, you guide us, man.
Sit back and relax.
All right, I got my coffee.
That's a joke. So here's my thing with 2D Clone Wars.
Tell me.
I don't remember how old I was when I first watched it, but I just remember being so locked in with it. I saw it at an integral time. I was 10, 11, 12 years old maybe, and I can't even remember if I saw it as a marathon on Cartoon Network or if I saw it in the shorts themselves, because if you go find it on Disney Plus now, they break it up into 2 seasons.
Right.
And it's just 2 1-hour long films basically.
Yeah.
So they took all these shorts and just mashed them all up. But it's just really nostalgic for me, and I couldn't remember why exactly until I started rewatching it again. But it's insane how these movies play out in a way. I was telling you right before we started, like, I don't remember the last time I watched it all the way through, but there would be scenes where I was anticipating what was about to happen.
Right.
Like, for instance, there's a scene where Palpatine and some Jedi, like I think it was Shakti, are going down this elevator, and Grievous is running beside them. And I was watching that, I was like, oh, I kind of remember this. And I was like, I think Grievous like turns his head like really suddenly. And then that happened. It was like,
wow.
Grievous is like watching down, and then he just turns his head and looks. It's like things like that I remember, but I didn't remember it until I started watching it again. But
right.
I love, I mean, I know it's not canon.
Sure.
But
we'll talk about that.
It's funny, like 2D Clone Wars to me, just here's general thoughts right up front. It plays out like Samurai Jack as Star Wars.
It's made by the same guy.
Well,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, Gindi. I think it was Tartakovsky. I want to say that's his name.
It's got very intense, very exaggerated battles and fight scenes. They use silence a lot. Yeah. Like no music playing, nobody talking, no nothing.
Maybe some wind blowing or something.
Yeah. It's real like intense, very like samurai. Yeah. And then now that you mentioned that about when it came out and like where it says in the plot line, it is literally, it's like watching the blueprint of what ended up being with Clone Wars and with Revenge of the Sith. Like not just, this was Clone Wars, and then they came out with the Clone Wars. Like, I mean, these are characters like Anakin, General Grievous, even Obi-Wan, Palpatine, Shakti, Kit Fisto, like all these characters that we saw what they are in canon. Yeah. Just getting fleshed out as just like this simple like cartoon. Yeah. So it's really cool to watch it with that context, because you're like, oh, I know General Grievous doesn't sound like that. He sounds really weird in this show. Sure. And like the way that they drew him, the way that Anakin was drawn and stuff, it's really cool looking at it that way, because it's almost like you peel back the curtain a little bit and you're like, this is kind of what they thought this was going to turn out as. And then what we're used to as the Clone Wars and as Revenge of the Sith is like what it actually was. Yeah. So you can kind of like hold it up against it, especially with it not being canon, where it fits in a timeline, and just be like, okay, this is 2D Clone Wars. This is what the Clone Wars was. And then you can compare and contrast things. Yeah.
I'll give sort of my general things about the show, and then we'll talk maybe about like, what are some similarities with what would become the Clone Wars with Clone Wars 2D, and just get into general things that were cool. I'll say this. I had never watched these. I believe that I started the first one, and I think I might have gotten 3 or 4 shorts in, and then I was just like, okay, I'll come back, and I didn't.
Never did, yeah.
So when this came out, let's see, that would have been 2003, 4. I would have been like 13, 14. And I think if I'm remembering right, for the most part, being a teenager who's like entering high school, for me and the friends I hung out with, we just weren't into cartoons, I guess. You know, it was like cartoons are cartoons. I was still super into Star Wars, but I was not watching Cartoon Network. Yeah. And this is like the internet was a thing, but I wasn't really online in a big way until maybe 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And then even then, it's just, unless you were alive then and of that age, you don't realize it, but just the internet was just very different. It was a lot more segmented, and there just wasn't a lot of the same stuff that there is now. That said, I didn't watch it. It wasn't on my radar at all. I've known about it. I knew that it was a guy that did Samurai Jack. I've heard various things over the years, just being a Star Wars fan, taking stuff in, but I never watched it. And watching it today for the first time, me and Jake sat down to watch it. It was awesome.
It's so cool.
It's everything you said. I mean, it's so cool. I loved that it started what felt like right after Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And it ended with what seemed like the battle above Coruscant. Like it was the Clone Wars the entire way through.
Yeah.
And the thought that I had as I finished, I was like, we talked about, a couple weeks ago, we mentioned how over on our Patreon, which, by the way, we're going to be restructuring the Patreon a little bit. We haven't nailed out all the details, you and me, but basically just flat rate will get you in. You can get all the bonus content. We're going through doing the Clone Wars, the Clone Wars, the 3D animated. We're watching it in the Patreon, and that's what all of our bonus episodes are. Basically, me going through and doing commentaries on all of that. And so we're going to be restructuring the Patreon. So check it out. By the time you hear this, it should all be squared away. So there's a link here if that's something you're interested in. Bonus content, access to the Discord rather, where we can just chat about Star Wars in general. But we're going through and watching Clone Wars together. But back to this. So we had talked about how if you watch episode 2 and then you watch the Clone Wars and then you watch 3, like it really makes the experience cool.
Yeah.
And that's great, but it takes months. I feel like if I really wanted to, I could watch episode 1, episode 2, binge these, and then watch episode 3
and
in
it
a
would
day.
fit. Yeah, it would fit right in.
It would flow really cool. And I know it's not canon, but there's so much that doesn't contradict at all. Like you can make it work in a lot of ways. And it's just a cool little alternate history. But man, I got to say, I loved it. The animation was really cool.
So cool.
The voice acting was super cool.
Yep.
I got to say this. Can we camp out for just a moment on how awesome General Grievous is?
Yeah, so that's kind of how I see this episode going, is that I've just got some like cool things throughout this that I wanted to camp out on and just kind of bring attention to. But yeah, Grievous.
Yeah.
The way they introduced him, the way that they like played him as this like really, really mysterious, powerful, like nobody understands where he came from, what he is. They drew him a lot like the obviously the bad guy from Samurai Jack,
which I didn't really watch, to be honest, but I'm gonna take your word on it.
But he's so he's over proportioned. Like there were so many shots of Grievous in this where you're like, he's not 18 feet tall, but the way they shot it, it looks like it, and they'll do these like panning shots like from his feet all the way up.
They did that with Dirge one time, and I was like, whoa, how big is Dirge right now?
Well, we can talk about Dirge.
We'll talk about
too.
Dirge, but please keep going with Grievous.
I mean, my only qualm with Grievous is like it's funny to hear his voice because you're like, that's not what his voice actually turned into. But yeah, he was just so menacing because the Grievous we get in the Clone Wars is this like dopey kind of like, yeah, he's cool and he's really powerful, but it's always just like, oh shucks, I missed him again. Yeah. So they kind of write him as like this like dorky kind of happy-go-lucky bad guy that nobody's really afraid of. But in this show, he's like terrifying. Yeah. In the Clone Wars, he was essentially kind of what he was in episode 3. Yeah. And this predicated that. And so I guess, I'm sorry, Gindi. He I guess just didn't get the memo that he's going to be this wheezing, coughing coward. Yeah. And he made him into this like straight up menace who the Jedi were kind of fearful of. Definitely. And it's a really interesting thing to see. Like you don't really ever see the Jedi fearful of anything. Actually, one of the things that I
the only thing I can think of that you see the Jedi really, really fearful of that I can think of recently is the way they acted with Chimere and the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Where it was like by the way, Count Dooku floated in this whenever he was meeting Ventress, and I got the Chimere vibes.
There were a couple of moments where it could be seen as like force flying.
Yeah. And it made me think of Chimere. However, back to the show, like, it was just cool to see Grievous be such a menacing character.
Yeah.
Because he's just not. And honestly, to me, this is like one of my favorite portrayals of Grievous.
Dude, yeah, me too. I agree.
Actually, it does kind of tie in with the way we saw Grievous in Tales of the Empire.
Yeah.
Whenever he was taking over Morgan Elsbeth's.
Mm-hmm.
So
it lines up a little bit there. And then it was cool near the end where we get to see Mace Windu like give him his cough. Where he like uses the force. Yeah. Or he's getting on a ship and Mace Windu just like does this thing with his hand and like crunches all the pulls the ribs out and then crunches them back, and then Grievous goes and then the door shuts and he flies off. You're like, that's where he gets the cough from.
Yeah. Okay. That's so cool. It's cool that I guess George must have given that note.
Yeah.
In between seasons,
yeah.
Like make him. Hey, give him a cough. Make him have a cough. He's gonna have a cough in the movie, so you got to make him look like he's got something wrong with him, so he has a cough. Let's talk about the production for a sec. I did see this because I was just curious. I was like, first off, season 1 and season 2 definitely felt different.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 had a little bit more. It almost looked a bit more. I think they were both computer animated, I would assume, but it just looked a bit smoother.
Yeah,
and I would say the quality looked better, quote unquote. It was just kind of a different feel, though. It did kind of like polish it up a bit.
It felt more mature.
Yeah.
I'm thinking in particular of like how Anakin looked in the season 1 versus season 2. Like,
yes, he definitely
more built, more muscular, longer hair.
And he got they got their actual Clone Wars armor.
Yeah,
and that. But what I did read, which blows my mind either way, although it makes sense that it's about an hour's worth of content. But Gindi said that they produced the first season in like 2 weeks.
Holy cow.
Which is wild because it's really well done.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really interesting things happening story-wise. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
To do that in 2 weeks, pretty wild. I mean, I guess, his studio was up and running and doing Samurai Jack, so presumably, like, he had a good team. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
But he mentioned the hardest part was, like, how do I tell this story in this this universe that I've loved since I was a kid? Like, imagine getting that call. George Lucas hits you up and he's like, I need you to make Star Wars.
Yeah.
Especially back then when it was just like nobody but George makes Star Wars, you know? But let's switch over to Dirge. Because you obviously know Dirge because you watched this show when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
I know Dirge because of the Bounty Hunter comics that written by Ethan Sachs, produced by Marvel, that we both really enjoyed. And Dirge was a character introduced. And I understood that Dirge was a character from 2D, but I didn't know him when he came in the comics. So when I saw him in the show now, I was like, it's Dirge from the comics. So I kind of had the opposite experience. But talk to me about Dirge.
Yeah, Dirge was just another... very mysterious, overpowered, it seemed, bad guy that I just kind of like gravitated towards when I was a kid. Just very big and very powerful looking. The way his I don't know, his proportions and the fact that he didn't speak.
Yes.
I'll never forget that scene of him on that speeder bike with the lance.
Yeah.
And all those IG units with him.
Yeah.
Like, that was just so cool. And to see him just absolutely wreak havoc for a while. And then to end up, I mean, even Obi-Wan really struggled to defeat him. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until he like blew him up from the inside out that it was like, okay, Dirge is actually dead now. But yeah,
not canon.
Correct. Yeah, not canon. So then when the Bounty Hunter comics like introduced him, I had to do some digging. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Dirge. And then I dug back and I was like, oh man, they wrote him out of canon. So here he was being reintroduced as like a canon character in a totally different time frame.
Because it was at that time, Bounty Hunters was running between Empire and Jedi.
Yeah.
So this would have been 20 plus years later. Yeah, absolutely.
He's just, I don't know, he's just a really cool, he's always just been a really cool character to me.
You mentioned him riding around with the lance. He did like have that Dark Knight kind of, not Batman, but like literally like a Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And I liked the idea of him being like a commander of a droid assassin army.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could get Dirge doing that in current canon, I feel like that would be so sick. Because like, you know, as we were watching, I tell Jake, I'm like, yo, it's like an IG army.
I know, yeah.
And
what could be more powerful?
The fact that like is everything you said, but also that he was seemingly indestructible, just made him very formidable. And so like I want to see more and more of that. I would love to see the character explored more. It was just a really cool introduction, and I see now why when he showed up in comics, fans were like, Dirge! Back then I was like, okay, I get it. He's from this 2D thing that's not canon anymore. Cool. But now that I've seen it, I'm like, I understand. I get why you guys are so excited about Dirge. Let's talk about some similarity between the Clone Wars series and this Clone Wars 2D series.
Okay.
The Kit Fisto episode.
Oh, yeah.
It was basically the underwater arc there on, is it Manon? I'm not sure, but
where the calamari and the I can't remember what
the
other species is.
Anyways, the name of the planet I guess doesn't really matter as much, but the point is like it was that arc with Lee Char, the young Prince Lee Char. It was that arc, but in a 3-minute form, essentially, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
with a giant epic underwater battle.
Yeah,
so many notable like shots in that. The Kit Fisto like jumping, like throwing his lightsaber, like throwing off his clothes, very samurai, and then he just jumped in the water and like grabbed his lightsaber and dove straight in.
And he had a little yin yang on his belt. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did notice that.
So I was like,
okay, I
it's
see.
Not the first time this has happened in Star Wars.
Yeah,
talking about the acolyte, like you know, it existed before, and of course. The Jedi Prime logo on The Last Jedi, like it's been in various things, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, George's original trilogy follows a lot of very Taoist principles, so it's not unheard of. But it was just interesting to see it so blatant.
Yeah. I thought that there were so many notable scenes in that, especially him. Like, I mean, we can talk about this. We'll talk about similarities now, but some of the like insanely overpowered force maneuvers in this show are just like you just watch it and you're like, there's no way, but also just like, man, that's so cool.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I was perfectly willing to suspend any disbelief that I had in that way. I felt like it was pretty I don't know, it was very fitting for the style and what it was. It was so overpowered. Here, I'll take some notes, and obviously whatever you got to throw in. The very first episode, you know, you had Palpatine very strategically. I like that. I don't know if this was like a note from George, because it transferred into the next Clone Wars, but you can see Palpatine already sort of manipulating Anakin against the Jedi. He's like, well, Anakin is surely ready to go do this thing. And then, you know, which then made the Jedi go, no, he's not, which makes Anakin kind of go,
Yeah.
You know, so it was interesting to see Palpatine pitting him against the Jedi here. The ARC troopers are cool.
So cool. That's the biggest standout scene for me.
Yeah.
The one of them flying in on the gunship, no sound, no nothing. The gunship goes down. They emerge out of it. Fordo's like calling out like signals and stuff. It's funny, the scene with the two battle droids that are like sniping. He's like, it's like so slow. He's like looking down at his sight, like trying to hone in. And then when he starts shooting, he just goes, it's like, I thought that was hilarious to me. Just the way that it was trying to set it up like he was about to make such a precise shot. And then the blaster just like goes all over the place. But
that's awesome. Another similarity to some degree with the Clone Wars is we saw Luminara with Barriss Offee.
Yep.
And you know, she's basically finishing her trials, I want to say, or at the very least she was moving up in some way. But I like that they were on Ilum,
Yep.
which, for those who aren't familiar with the history of the planet Ilum, in the Clone Wars, the 3D version, it's where younglings go to get their kyber crystals. Maybe that's what Beresafi was there doing, was
Yeah.
getting her kyber crystal.
Yeah, because it opens up them talking about the crystal and the hilt is
the
the
way
Jedi,
that-
and
yeah.
the Jedi is the hilt. They like
The kyber is the heart, which I guess would be
that. Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Force, or and so anyways, in the Clone Wars, Ilum is where they go to get their kyber crystals. It later shows up in, I want to say, dude, I feel like the Force Unleashed, or not the Force Unleashed, I'm sorry, Jedi Fallen Order. I want to say maybe they go to Ilum there, but Ilum does become Starkiller Base in The Force Awakens. So there's all kinds of parallels across the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that they were on Ilum, and that we got to see, Yoda rescue them, and then there was, he convinced Padme. I don't know if it was Panaka or if it was the other guy. I forget the other guy's name. Tycho.
I think it was Tycho.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tycho,
or
yeah. Whatever his name is.
It wasn't
Anyways,
because Panaka didn't have the
the patch.
the eye patch,
Yeah,
yeah.
You're right. So it was the eye patch guy, and how he persuaded him, and Padme
Yoda.
had a little persuasion joke.
Yeah.
That was cool. There was a lot of different little Easter eggs of Star Wars dialogue from the original movies. Like there was when Anakin was in space, the space battle from the season 1 before he goes and follows Ventress, like that whole space battle. And that's when I realized, oh, these are very like serialized. Like they're telling one full story. Like I didn't know it was going to be that. I thought that maybe they were all just going to be random. I didn't know that they were going to flow.
Yeah, because I mean, if you watch it for the first time in this format, you would never know it was just a bunch of random shorts thrown together.
Never. And so in that way, it does. Let me just like say this, because we didn't start with this, and I want to make sure I don't forget. Highly recommend anybody go watch these. They were fun.
Oh, please.
Definitely go watch them. I had not seen them, and I had a blast. They were really cool. But there was a scene whenever he's fighting in space, where when he locked in, he says, "I have you now," just like Vader does to Luke, in the Death Star trench run. And there were a couple of I think he even gave an most impressive, maybe that was in season 2, but there were things like that were said. Obi-Wan says, "I've got a bad feeling about this." All these little things like that, and it was just really cool. Let's talk about Anakin and Ventress. So take us there for a second.
I'll let you start with this. So I watched the second part yesterday and today, or sorry, partially Thursday night, and then the rest of it this afternoon.
Okay.
I watched part 1 last week, so last week's a little fuzzier for me.
That's all good. So the biggest thing that I thought was cool, I mean, obviously the fight and everything.
The long battle between them was
sick, and the animation was great, and it was cool. With I like seeing Dooku bring Ventress in, and her sort of trial that she went through, where she fought in that little gladiator pit. Like that was all super cool. Like that was cool. It was great. It was interesting when Palpatine sort of selected her and said like, "Oh yeah, you're good," and she had like all this, "Oh, I'm good," and basically she was just being sent to be killed off by Anakin. Which is interesting too, because it's like, Dooku, you don't see what Palpatine is doing. Like he wants Anakin to be his apprentice. Like you idiot, you just took your apprentice and sacrificed it for his whatever. It's the dark side clouds things, I guess. But the one thing that I didn't know when that episode was happening, maybe I missed it, or maybe it was a retcon in season 2, but Anakin tells Obi-Wan, he says, I went and I did this fight, the fight that I had on Yavin 4. And I was like, oh, that's where the Rebel base was in A New Hope.
Yep.
Like I didn't realize that's
same
where it was.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really interesting, really cool. I'll keep going through the few notes that I did. And also Duel of the Fates was playing during Anakin and Ventress's fight.
They did such a good job of reusing like music that we're used to hearing. Like
Yes.
the Force theme played plenty throughout this. I don't know. Did we get any? We didn't get any Vader's theme. I don't think.
I don't think so.
No.
But there was the mask in his like vision that he had in season 2.
Yeah.
And that was cool. So here's a question I had for you. I think not like no. I was going to ask you. I was going to verify that there were BT-1 battle droids in Attack of the Clones, and there was because they showed up in Geonosis, right?
mhm.
Okay. But I did notice that the banking clan was the immune species that plague us, which is canon,
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. The surrender episode there.
Yep.
And I was just curious. I was like, I don't remember if there were BT-1s in Attack of the Clones, but now of course
I didn't remember that the scientists from the second part,
Techno Union.
the Techno Union,
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't remember that they were in there's some the second part just had some like real dark, ugly, kind of gross stuff in it, I guess I would say. But we can go there in a minute when we get to that. But.
So, I think we're there. We're in volume 2. Like I said, I felt there was a bit of a quality jump.
Yeah.
Again, it's not even better or worse. It's different, but
Mm-hmm.
it was easy to see. I gotta say this. I gotta say it. All right, everybody. Oh, I guess we're already recording. You don't have to get your recorders out. Kiadi-Mundi.
Yeah.
Not so bad in this one. He's not so bad. I didn't mind this version of
I
Kiadi-Mundi.
laughed, man. I laughed so hard when he came on screen. I was like, man, Tyler is just like squirming right now.
Well, Jake will tell you. I was like, oh, it's Kiadi-Mundi. All right.
But yeah, I mean, he was kind of
He's not
wasn't
so
a
bad.
total like piece of crap.
He
in
was
this.
like, Ayla Sakura, Shakti, like you're alive. I'm so happy. I'm like, all right, okay. Because I
Yeah.
feel like normally it'd be like, how did you almost die? What's wrong with you? I feel like that's how he would normally act.
Also,
So,
he looked like he definitely looked like he fit with the acolyte change of his age in this one because he was a bit more fit and well
Yeah.
put together, I guess.
yeah, you might be right about that.
Yeah, he was definitely taking care of himself a little bit better during Clone Wars. How about Mace Windu in this?
Talk to me about him. Yeah.
Just
It sounded like Samuel L., by the way.
it did
Which
sound like
makes
him.
sense because was he involved in Samurai Jack? Or am I making that up completely?
I don't know.
Okay. You
He
do
was
that and
just-
I'll look.
Dude, Mace Windu in this show was absolutely relentless. He fought with you get so much more of that rage of Mace Windu in this, like in battle. I feel like we see Mace Windu
Quick
like
answer,
deal.
no, by the way.
No,
Oh.
it wasn't him.
I think I might know what it is. Phil Lamar was Samurai Jack, and I believe Phil Lamar may have voiced Mace Windu at some point in Clone Wars. So maybe I'm just crossing up my Mace Windu.
Yeah.
That's not neither here nor there. Please keep going.
I mean, Mace Windu is a character that we know struggles a lot with his anger.
Mm-hmm.
We see it a lot more in the prequel movies, like diplomatically or like socially or in relationships. We don't get a chance to see it so much like in battle.
Right.
And we got to see a lot of it in this show, just him absolutely being unbelievably overpowered and unmatched. I think about the battle where that big sledgehammer thing would like come down and like smack the earth, and it would cause these big sand waves, and you could see the building tension in him. Like every time he would like kill a bunch of droids, and then he would like stop and then turn around, and then boom, here's another sand wave. Just like you can tell, like the anger is just building because he's like, come on, like trying to do his thing, trying to fight. But there was one scene where they had him just go berserk on a couple of super battle droids and like destroy them in a couple of different ways, namely the last one being, and this ties in with the whole like overpowered force thing, but like using the force to literally like pull all the bolts out of the droid and then it just like collapsed in a pile of metal on the ground. I was like, dude, that's so like that's so inventive to think about how you would do something like that. But yeah, just and then the Grievous thing where he just like crushes his whole rib cage. Just a lot of like overpowered force moves in this show, and so cool to watch. I think this might be some of my favorite action in Star Wars. Like if you sit down and watch these two things versus the movies or a TV show, like, yeah, we got a lot of good stuff in Ahsoka. There's plenty of good battles in Mandalorian, Duel of the Fates, obviously.
Obviously, yeah.
Like, those types of things are epic in their own way, but you get a type of fighting in this that you can't get in live action.
Right.
And, I mean, we get a lot of that in the Clone Wars as well, but the style that they did this with was just so intense and fast-paced. And, like, Grievous fighting against... Shakti, the Ithorian, and that other Jedi.
The Ithorian Jedi was so cool, by the way.
Yeah,
I was really into that.
So yeah, just so many good battles and kills. Like in quotes, I say that in quotes because you don't really kill droids, but like so many good moves performed on droids to like destroy them or whatever. It was just, I don't know. It keeps you locked in a lot, I feel like.
Last couple observations I'll give before we round this out. I really loved the vision that Yoda had, where Qui-Gon had a young Anakin on Dagobah, and it was essentially what would later come to pass with Yoda and Luke on Dagobah.
Yep.
And, just, of course, what we find out later in Season 6 of the Clone Wars, that Qui-Gon is the one that led Yoda to Dagobah and taught him how to become one with the Force. I just love it so much and think it's so cool. It was great.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I just watched Empire Strikes Back this past week.
Oh yeah, with watching with Lacey.
Yep.
And so Cameron, for those that don't know, Cameron, his girlfriend, he's been showing his girlfriend the original trilogy, and
she's tracking extremely well.
Awesome.
Yeah. We may, if we're feeling, she's been watching The Blacklist, so we may watch a Blacklist marathon tonight, or maybe if she's feeling it, we'll go into Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I'm glad you bring that up because we just watched that, and I was thinking like how cool that was to have that comparison between Dagobah with them.
Very cool. The only other thing was just the council scene. I'm trying to recall the details. I'm taking all this in, obviously, in a very quick, short amount of time. But just there was a council scene after that. I'm trying to remember exactly the details. I wrote in my notes that I just really enjoyed the council scene. I think it was Mace talking about how the Jedi shouldn't allow for the Senate and the Republic to interfere too much with their decisions. It was when I think they were trying to. It was a scene where they were saying that like Anakin could forego the Jedi trials.
Yeah,
and it was interesting to note that Mace was right in this case. But again, sometimes rightness doesn't always mean that that's the best way to go about things. Like there's I guess almost like a game to be played to some degree in that way. But I just really like that scene. It was just a very interesting thing.
A similarity. I'm glad you're jogging my memory a lot now because I kept thinking of things while I was watching. I was like, oh, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. And I never pulled out my phone to like start making notes because I was just like, I was in it. I didn't want to have to pause and stop and type. But we saw that exact thing happen in High Republic right now. Like after the Starlight Beacon disaster, where we see them broadcasting across all the galaxy or all the planets of where Jedi are stationed, saying that, hey, for the time being, we're advancing everyone's training.
Yeah,
we're automatically granting the rank of Jedi Knight to like students. So that was a cool comparison, I feel like.
And it's honestly a pretty bad idea in hindsight for
terrible idea.
You shouldn't, in crisis, bend the rules that you've created. Like those guidelines are there for a reason. It kind of reminds me of like, even like in our country, during the War on Terror, there's the Patriot Act, and it's like it's a short-sighted thing where that can sometimes come back to bite you in the tail if you're not careful. So it's interesting. I did note that as well.
Also, I wouldn't ever imagine that bringing all the Jedi to one single planet would ever be a good idea. I can't remember if they did it in this or if that was just a High Republic thing, but the High Republic was definitely like it called all Jedi back to Coruscant. It's
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right idea.
Yep. Well, I enjoyed it. Great recommendation, Cameron. I'm glad that we watched it. And I'll say it again, like, Cameron mentioned it to me, like, hey, we should do Clone Wars 2D, and I was like, great, yeah, we'll try. I've never really watched them, and I'm glad that we did. So thank you, Cameron, and maybe that's a good recommendation for you if you haven't seen it, is to go check it out.
Yeah.
And if you check it out and you enjoy it, again, write us in or do a voice message and send it over to starwarsafterparty@gmail.com, and we'll play you on the show. We'd love to have your thoughts. It was a good time. Next week, we should be talking about, as the time that this podcast drops on Thursday, tomorrow, the Star Wars Lego miniseries is dropping.
Oh yeah.
So we'll catch that, and that's what we should be talking about next week. So yeah, I guess we're going Star Wars animation for a little while.
I think
non-canon Star Wars. But
I think we're really just going fun Star Wars right now.
That's true.
Because we covered Solo,
Yeah.
very fun Star Wars, 2D Clone Wars, also very fun Star Wars,
Yeah.
and then Lego Rebuild the Galaxy. I think that'll be fun too.
Yeah. We're in a. I kind of live in Star Wars fun, but I understand that not all the things that I think are fun are. These are just unabashedly fun.
Yeah,
things.
that's
know
what I meant.
exactly
Just
what you mean.
easier to digest, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the Acolyte where you're thinking about it all week and you rewatch it and it sort of recontextualizes every day in your mind. It's not that. It's
even
definitely-
even Ahsoka, I feel like
Yeah,
did a lot of
absolutely.
that too. Yeah.
Ahsoka was very deep as well with the philosophical. It all lately has been, and I imagine Andor will probably be that too in a lot of
Yep.
ways. So you're right. We're going to spend the time between now and Andor, which I'm assuming is going to be sometime in 2025, and it's probably going to be very dark and very serious. We're going to spend all of our time just having fun.
Having
so
some
if
good,
if
and
that's
then,
what you're
and then
into,
Skeleton Crew.
yeah, Skeleton.
So
That's
there
what I'm
we go.
saying. That's
Yeah.
going to be fun. I
Yeah.
imagine it's going to be pretty lighthearted.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you're sort of out there in Star Wars fandom and you're like, man, Star Wars has just gotten so serious. Everybody's arguing. Everybody's doing all this stuff. Not your boys here at the after
Nope.
party.
Nope.
And I know Kayla, when she guests, same way. We're just trying to have some fun. It's a party after all. So, if that's what you're into, then maybe you should hang out with us.
I think so.
I think that sounds about right. So
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and we will land this ship. We'll be back next week talking about Rebuild the Galaxy, right? That's what it's called.
Yep.
I'm excited, man. I know that you have obviously an affinity for Legos, and maybe I'll make it a goal of mine to build the
Bad
Havoc
Batch
Marauder.
Shuttle, yeah.
Yep. And then we'll talk about my experience doing that, and we can talk about Lego, the Rebuild the Galaxy miniseries. Is it canon? Of course not. It's going to be wild and crazy, but
Yeah.
is it going to be fun?
Absolutely.
Most definitely. So I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to watch it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time. In the meantime, maybe between now and then, some Return of the Jedi might go down.
Definitely.
Make sure you keep us posted on that. I'm sure me and Kayla are going to be getting into more Outlaws. Tons of Star Wars to talk about. We'll be
Always.
back next week. Until then, Tyler out.
Cameron out.